You tell yourself this time will be different. You wake up earlier. You write things down. You stop doing the thing you know keeps pulling you back. You think about what you're going to do differently before the day even starts. For a little while, it feels real. There's movement in it. You can feel that familiar thing again, the part of you that wants to believe maybe you finally figured it out. Then, a few days later, you're back in the same place. Not exactly, just enough that you recognize it. You're sitting in the same room, thinking the same thoughts, making the same promise again. Welcome back to Sparks of Insight. The strange thing is, when nothing changes, it rarely feels like nothing changed. It feels like you tried, because you did. You thought about it more. You paid attention to it. You wanted something different. You kept coming back to it in your mind. That's why it's so frustrating. Because it doesn't feel like you're doing nothing. It feels like you're carrying it everywhere. You think about leaving. You think about speaking up, or about stopping. You also think about becoming someone who finally does what they already know they need to do. But most of it stays inside your head. You walk through the same days with a different conversation running underneath them. You tell yourself that next time you won't answer right away. Next time you won't go back. And you won't explain yourself again. Or you'll say what you actually mean. Then next time comes. And you do what you always do. Not because you want to. Because by the time the moment arrives, you are already inside the version of yourself that knows how to survive it. You say yes before you think. You laugh before you feel. You explain before you even know what you're trying to explain. Or you leave the conversation thinking, why did I do that again? The hard part is that people usually think nothing changes because they aren't trying hard enough. So they push harder. They make bigger promises. They become more intense, watch more things, think about themselves more, keep trying to solve the same thing from the same place. But if the place doesn't change, the pattern doesn't either. You can spend years standing in the same emotional position and call it progress because the words are changing. The real reason it feels like you're stuck is because you are still standing in front of the same thing every time. The same fear, same need, or a part of you that wants to keep the peace, or avoid the feeling, or not to disappoint anyone. So you keep trying to change your behavior while protecting the thing underneath it. You tell yourself you're trying to stop explaining yourself. But underneath that, you still need everyone to understand you. You tell yourself you're trying to move on. But underneath that, you still need the ending to be different. You tell yourself you're trying to stop going back. But underneath that, you still need them to become who you hoped they were. Nothing changes because a deeper thing hasn't changed. You're still standing in the same place. You can see this in small moments. When you pick up the phone, or look at the same name, and already know you shouldn't send anything. You know it before you even open the conversation. But you do. You read old messages. You start writing something. Then you stop. You write it again. You stare at it, delete it, and put the phone down. Then pick it up 10 minutes later. By the end of the night, nothing happened, but you're exhausted. Because inside, you went somewhere. You walked the whole path again, You already know how the path ends. But there is a part of you that keeps hoping maybe this time it won't. That's what makes these patterns so difficult. They do not survive because they are true. They survive because they are familiar. You can know something isn't good for you and still keep reaching for it. Not because you are weak, because some part of you has learned that familiar feels safer than different. Even if familiar hurts, even if familiar keeps you in the same place. A lot of people spend years waiting for the moment they finally feel ready. The moment they stop being afraid. The moment they become the kind of person who doesn't hesitate anymore. But that person almost never comes, because hesitation isn't the thing in the way. It is the thing protecting what is underneath. You hesitate because something inside you still believes staying the same is safer. It's safer than being seen or being wrong. Safer than losing the person. Safer than finding out nothing changes even after you try. So you stay close to the edge of the thing you want. You think about it, you imagine it, and you almost do it. Then you walk back, and because you came close, it feels like movement. But you are still in the same place. You can see this in relationships. You keep having the same conversation in different forms. You keep ending up with people who make you feel the same way. At first they look different, different personality, different story. But after a while, it starts to feel familiar again. You are trying harder, explaining more, waiting longer, accepting things you already know are not enough. You tell yourself maybe this time, if you say it better, they will understand. Maybe this time, if you are patient enough, they will change. Maybe this time, if you stop needing so much, it will finally work. But you are still standing in the same place. The place where you believe you have to earn what you should not need to be earned. The place where you keep trying to become acceptable to people who have already shown you they cannot meet you. Nothing changes because you keep bringing the same invisible rule with you. The rule that says, if I try harder, maybe I will finally be enough. That rule changes everything around it. It changes who you stay with, what you tolerate, what you keep returning to. You stop listening to the part of you that already knows. You already know when something feels wrong, and you already know when you are pretending. And you already know when you are staying, because leaving would mean facing something you do not want to face. But knowing is not always enough, because knowing does not automatically move you. You can know for years. You can sit with truth every day and even talk about it. Still nothing changes. Not because you are broken, because there is a difference between seeing the pattern and leaving the place that created it. Most people never leave the place. They keep standing there, hoping the feeling will disappear, hoping eventually they will stop wanting what they cannot have, hoping eventually they will become brave enough. But the strange thing is, sometimes the reason nothing changes is because you are waiting for certainty. You want to know before you move. You want to know it will work. You want to know you won't regret it. So you stay. You think. You go in circles. You replay the same thing until it feels familiar enough to call it understanding. But all that really happened is you stayed in the same place longer. There are people who have been leaving for years without ever actually leaving. They pull away, then come back. They decide and then undo it. They know, then they talk themselves out of it. They say this is the last time. Then they find themselves back in the same room, having the same conversation, feeling the same thing they promised themselves they were done with. The hardest part is not that the pattern repeats. The hardest part is that every time it repeats, you lose a little more trust in yourself. Because you were there, you saw it, you knew, and still somehow you ended up back in the same place. After a while, you stop believing yourself. You stop taking your own feelings seriously. You stop trusting the part of you that knows. Because you think, if I really knew, I would have changed by now. But that is not true. Sometimes you know long before you are willing to stop protecting what keeps you stuck. Sometimes you know long before you are ready to disappoint people. Long before you are ready to be alone. Or before you are ready to let go of the version of your life you wanted. You are not still in the same place because you do not know. You are still in the same place because some part of you is still trying to keep something. The hope, the old story, the version of yourself that still believes if you just try harder, this time will finally be different. But every time you go back, you learn something. Not all at once, not enough to change everything, just enough that eventually the old place stops feeling invisible. You start noticing it sooner. You hear yourself saying the same thing again. Or you feel yourself making the same excuse. You notice how quickly you leave yourself to stay connected to something else. At first, that awareness changes nothing. You still do it. You still go back. You still end up where you always end up. But eventually something becomes harder to ignore. You stop believing your own explanations. You stop being able to pretend you don't see. You reach the point where staying the same becomes more painful than changing. That is usually when something finally shifts. Not because you learned something new, because you finally stop standing in the same place. Thank you everyone for watching, and remember, the spark is within you.